Tonight's demonstrator is Joe Bohn. He's a member of the club. He's going to walk us through his process of creating kaleidoscopes. For any of you who have grandchildren, this will be a wonderful thing to learn how to do. Joe,
Thank you.
up to you.
Thank you. Joe Bohn. I'm from Argyle, Texas. I've been printing since 2007. On the screen, that's the first kaleidoscope I ever made. It was a mini kaleidoscope kit, $18.95 from Craft Supplies USA. Is it up there?
Yep.
Okay. It was pretty unremarkable, but the grandkids loved it. It came with everything you needed. It had 3 mirrors. It had the little tchotchkes that go in the tumbler, had a brass tube and all the fittings. All you had to do was turn the outside and you had a nice little egg-shaped kaleidoscope. Anyway, that's the first one I ever made. And I decided that I wanted to make a legacy gift for my grandkids. I wanted something that would last them the rest of their lives. And to give something to a grandkid all the way to the end of their life, that's a pretty rugged journey on it, boy. So I wanted to make something that was indestructible. Someday I'm going to put on this and it's going to come off and embarrass me. I found 2 places online that we call it Kaleidoscope Supplies, Boston Craft Works, and Kaleidoscopes to You. If you just Google those names, their websites will come up. That's where I get most of my stuff. There are other places that have bits and pieces, but with these 2, you can get just about everything you need. We're going to go over just what's in a kaleidoscope. The very first thing you need is a lens. I use a focal length of 3.5 to 7 inches. That gives you enough room to focus. This is the first one I made, and I'm going to pass it around, and then I'm going to pass the last one I made around, and y'all can see the difference on how things have progressed over the years. Can you start that one? And somebody grabbed that one and was started. I wanted to go around after this one, so. That one I turned completely out of wood. I made a small turnout for the object chamber to go on. Then I made a groove with my parting tool, and I put three set screws to hold that on. That's the only way I could figure out how to do it. And it works, but it's funky and it's grindy and it's just not very nice. It's a perfectly good kaleidoscope, and the kids can't destroy it. It just wasn't where I wanted to be. So I started looking at these kaleidoscope supplies, and I found a place that's kaleidoscope bearings. I thought a bearing would be nice, give it a nice smooth action. So I thought, it's $9 per bearing, but I'll order one. Surely it comes with instructions. It did. Had no idea how to do it. You can't go online and Google how to put a bearing in a kaleidoscope. It's just not there. So I came up with my own method. The very first thing I thought I needed was something to put this on so that I could secure the 2 pieces together. So I found this polycarbonate online. This polycarbonate tube, it's really strong, and it's exactly what I needed, but it's the wrong size. So, you keep going, you don't give up. I decided I'd put a wedge around here, so I did that. That works really well. But in turning several of these, I noticed that the drops in here caused it to bind every once in a while. I didn't get that smooth turnaround. If I'm going to spend the time to put a bearing on, I want it to be smooth and like gravy. So back to the internet, I found shipping tubes. Those are the tubes that you put red plastic on both ends and they put stuff in the middle. Perfect fit. So it's just a plain shipping tube. It's way too flimsy to use, but it's perfect to make a shim for this. So I cut up about that much and make a shim. And then the bearing fits really snug. And you want that because the precision of the turn is all related to how well you seat this bearing and how flush it is with the rest of the housing. If you get it off to one side, it's going to grind.
Okay, you guys ready for stamp?
What he's passing around now is an example of a failure. It's got some kind of hanger and I don't know what it is. Probably I overglued, some glue dropped out. I don't know. But it's the importance of following procedures and doing it right. Now, I've got a demo piece here that can be torn apart, and we'll go over these parts later. But I built this for this presentation. And these are the parts that I use. There's 6 pieces. So I use the shipping tube to mount the bearing on. Then I can mount the bearing smoothly on here. That glues in there. You wedge it so it won't scrape. Let that dry. Yes. First, I would glue the tube into the housing, into here. Now, I've glued the lens into the bottom of this. Normally, I don't glue the lens in, I let it float free. But I couldn't figure out how to make the demo without the lens falling out. You want to make sure that the lens is in there because you want to leave room for that lens. So I use E6000 glue when I do these because it never gets hard. And you don't use a lot of it, but just put it in there and swirl it around so you know it's good and fixed. Then you let that dry. Then you can put the E6000 on here or epoxy and shim it. Let that dry. When you turn this, you make a turnout, you make a loop out for the bearing, and you make a loop out for the object chamber. So you put a light coat of E6000 here, a very light coat of E6000 on the bearing. You slide that on with the shim in place and let it dry. Have I confused everybody? Okay. Once that's done, I will put maybe a dot of E6000 on this just to hold it in place and get it down in there. That's the mirrors. Pretty cool. Same thing, just a dot of glue on the object chamber. Once it's all dried, you take the shims out and it's all nice. So that's the assembly. Now we're not going to go through all the construction techniques. I just wanted to show you how mine goes together. Parts of the we talked about the lens. I mount my lens between 2 washers, 2 fender washers that I painted black. And I buy them so that they fit right in the opening. So it's held in there. And we bring it out here. So 2 fender washers, just epoxy glue it in between, and it'll fit right in there. Then you can put your base on, and that holds your lens in place. Mirrors. It's very important that you use a surface mirror. I can pass this around now. Now you'll have to hold it together to look through it. I used a shower mirror in this. It's acrylic and it's got the mirror on the rear. You'll notice just how poor the image is when you use a rear surface mirror. When you look through it, the image at the end is clear, but it starts to get fuzzier and fuzzier because you're looking through glass at an angle towards that image. So you have to use surface mirrors. You'll have to hold this together because if you want to take it apart and put it back together, that's fine. Most mirrors have the reflective coating on the back of the glass. On a surface mirror, the reflective coating is on the front of the glass. It comes like this. They're very thin, and it has a blue protection on the surface side. Don't take this off until you're be ready to take it off. You don't want to damage this. Any damage to the mirror or any dirt on the mirror is going to be magnified over and over and over and over and over and over again. So you need to do this. I wouldn't do this in a workshop. I would do it someplace clean on a lint-free cloth and wear gloves. And they are very thin. Now they come in acrylic, and they're much easier to work with, except on an acrylic mirror, the surface is much more fragile. So if you get a speck of dirt on an acrylic mirror, you can't clean it off. So I use glass mirrors just because they're a little bit more rugged in case you get a fleck of dirt on there or something. Mirrors,
You see those discarding?
I buy my mirrors pre-cut. You can buy sheet mirrors, you can buy them in 12 by 12s, you can buy them in 16 by 16 and cut your own if you're that adventurous. I just buy mine in pre-cut. And it's getting hard to find people who pre-cut the mirrors. But I think Kaleidoscopes TV still does a 6 5/16 by 1 1/16 mirror. When you size your polycarbonate tubing, or, and we're going to talk about a different way to do it. You're not using polycarbonate tubing. When you size this, you need to take into account the triangle you're going to make with your mirror. You want to make sure it's going to fit. You're going to put some tape around it, and you have some leeway in how big you can make it by adding more tape. But if it's too small, it's not going to work. The normal bore, if you weren't using the polycarbonate tubing for these mirrors, is 1 3/8 inch bore. If you use the polycarbonate tubing, its center is 40 millimeters. So, yeah, that's really how you do it. You would lay the blue side down on a lint-free cloth. So you lay the blue side down, put three or so strips of tape, and then fold them. The trick on folding the mirrors is the lap joints all have to go in the same direction. If you don't go in the same direction with all your lap joints, you're not going to have a right triangle, and your image is going to be off. And when you do that cigar roll technique with the tape, it's incredibly difficult to get those laps right because you're fighting them. So I came up with this. It's a really simple solution. You have stripped the blue stuff off. You're handling these with gloves. You just put a mirror in the bottom. Then you stack the next mirror on, and you stack the next mirror on, and you can control which way the laps go. And this is basically just plastic that I've ripped down to. So the internal size is the same as the width of the mirror, and I beveled them on the edges on a sander and put rubber bands around. So you'll stick those 3 in there, put your tape on there, and you can use any kind of tape you want. You're taping on the glass side, so you can use electrical tape, use medical tape. That transparent medical tape tears real easy, so it's really nice to use that. And then you dry fit it into your chamber. If it's too loose, put a little bit more tape on there. If it's too tight, take the tape off. But you're going to put a spot of glue on there because you don't want it flopping back and forth if somebody drops it. You don't want the mirror chamber to shift into the object chamber and start to rub. So we want it locked in there. But I build mine so they can be disassembled. That's why I don't glue the lens in. Take the end cap off, pop the lens out. You can take the mirrors out then if you glue them lightly, and you can even pop the object chamber out. You can service the inside of the kaleidoscope if something goes wrong. That's the reason I do it that way. Questions on mirrors? I have not. The original kaleidoscopes made back in the 1500s were just 2 sides, and they just took them on an object and moved them around. So they were pretty simple. I think the 3-sided kaleidoscope was invented in 1803, something like that. So, and there are ways to make put more mirrors on there. I just never have done it. Object chambers. This is my favorite object chamber, the hemispheric. It's the one I did on that new one that we just passed around. I think it makes a lovely kaleidoscope. There's enough room in there for the objects to tumble in several directions. They make these smaller ones. These are made to fit flush. And then they make one like this. These are both made to protrude. You have a little inset there that you set into. And then they make ginormous ones. I get those from Boston Craft Works. They come in at a whopping $2.95 a piece. So, depending on which one you pick, I'm sure the bigger ones are a little more expensive. Now, object chambers, all of mine are silicone filled. You don't have to fill it with silicone if you don't want to. If you don't fill it with silicone, your objects are going to tumble faster. They're going to give you that old school kaleidoscope look, like the one I used to get at 2G in Wyatt Town and Country Shopping Center in Lubbock, Texas. It was made in Japan and made out of cardboard. You're going to get that effect. It's perfectly okay. I just like mine silicone filled. I think it's a we'll wait till that goes by. Could you tell him to stop? Okay. So, object chambers. If you want to fill it, whether you want to fill it with silicone or not, you have to secure the top. And this gets kind of crazy. You put your objects in there, and I have an example of what not to do here. I don't know if y'all can see that. That object chamber has too much stuff in it. It's almost full. And it's little bitty stuff. And when you look through it, it's just a mess. So I need to replace that. I fill them about halfway full with objects. And we'll talk about the objects here in a minute, how you pick them and procure them. But once you get your objects in there, you want to seal the top. Let me make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. You can also buy pre-filled object chambers, like this one. That first one I passed around, first one I ever made, I bought that object chamber. It cost me $40. These are artists and people that, some people do this for a living, and they name them Starry Night and Black Death, and they have names for them. But you can also get them pre-filled from other places a lot cheaper. And if you want to pick your own objects, that's fine. Halfway full. At this point, you want to seal the object chamber, and this is the tough part. You have to run a bead of glue around this edge. There's a little glue out there. You have to run a very minimal bead of glue, and it has to be all the way around. It has to be smooth. And then you have to put it in place. And sometimes they snap, sometimes they go together easy. It depends on which guy in China made them. Some of them, they go together so hard you have to force it. I've had to put them in a bench vise to get them to snap. And you run a real risk of cracking them at that point. My original method when I made some of these was to put them in a sock, put them on the floor and stand on them until they popped. I found that a bit imprecise. So I have used a bench vise, but what I actually bought was a watch press. It's a press that they use to put watch crystals in watches. And it works really nice. You want to keep some pressure on it. And we're going to go over how to glue these things, and I'm going to tell you, don't do what they say to do when you glue this. It won't work. Okay, objects. I just go to Hobby Lobby and the other craft stores and pick up stuff that I like. I also buy, up here at the top, you can see watch gears. You can buy watch pieces on eBay by the gram. So people disassemble watches and sell the parts. And I think watch gears thrown in there gives it kind of an interesting look. You know, if you like that sort of thing. But all sorts of glass beads, whatever you can find that you like. I have 3 trays of this stuff. This is what they recommend. And this is basically PVC glue, like you'd put at good Home Depot. And then they give you these tiny little quirks to put in the hole. When I did it this way, I had about a 30% failure rate of leaks. I just never could make it work. Also, if you have any screws out and you get fingerprints on here, they're on there forever. You can't. This stuff fuses the plastic, so if you get a fingerprint or a drip or a glue on there, you can ruin your object chamber. So, does anybody use UV glue? It's amazing. Anybody, y'all know, use UV? Yeah. You basically tell it when you get hard. When you go to the dentist and they put that thing in your mouth that beeps, he's setting up UV glue. It was invented by a dentist. It's been moved into the fingernail industry, but fingernail people use it. What I like about it is I take a blunt syringe, fill it with UV glue, run it around that edge. I started the hole. There's a tiny little hole here. That's for you to put your silicone in if you decide to do that. Start at the hole so I have a landmark, and I go all the way around with that blunt syringe very slowly and make sure there are no bubbles. Then I use whatever method is necessary to get it to shut. If squeezing it shut works, that's fine. The good thing about the UV glue is you can clean the outside off now. Completely wipe it down, get it perfectly clean. And you can set it out in the sun and it'll set up. You can buy the little flashlight and then you'll set it up. This stuff is really cheap. And there's thousands of uses for it in the workshop. Instead of the little corks, I buy these little bitty tiny set screws. And they self-cap in there. So nice. Now we haven't put the silicone in there yet, so we're not ready to put the caps on. So if you're interested in putting the silicone on, I use this blunt nose syringe like that one, a different one. Fill it up about to there, just 80% maybe. Try not to get silicone in the hole if you can. Don't let it run out. Once you do that, you can self-cap that. Put a little drop of the UV glue on there, self-cap it in. Put a drop of UV glue on top of that. Put it under your light source. And I've never had one leak, ever. I still proof them in a coffee filter. I take a brown coffee filter and wrap them up and leave them in there for a few days, the side down, just to make sure it's not going to leak. The silicone, 8 ounces of silicone, I use the 500 viscosity, is $15. That'll do a lot of kaleidoscopes. Yes. That was that. Yes, those little tiny grub screw. They're just a little bit larger than the hole and they self-tap. No. You really won't. This is more, and I do face the screw side in towards the mirrors, but it's not really in the view of the mirrors. And if you do see it, it's just going to show up as another tchotchke. You know, it's just going to be another piece floating around in there. So you don't have to worry about that. That's the E6000 glue that I use. And I do like it for most things on this kaleidoscope because it doesn't set up hard. It maintains that bit of flexibility. Now, I made the kaleidoscope for my mother, and the relative humidity here is 50% sometimes, maybe inside. She lives in Lubbock where the relative humidity is not, like 3%. And I gave her that kaleidoscope and it cracked. It's the only one I ever had cracked. As far as, we're going to talk about how to turn these pieces, and I don't want to get off in the weeds here, but I have a special way that I do this. And we're going to talk about how to core and turn the pieces we're going to make the kaleidoscope out of. This is the wood turning part. I had 12-inch 3x3, I believe it was 3x3 exotic green wood. So it was all green. I cut them all in half so that I have 6-inch pieces. I don't like to bore further than 6 inches because I found that when you bore deeper than 6 inches, this end starts to oscillate. 6 inches, you can go pretty true. Unless you don't have to worry about running your quill back and moving forward. And something I might mention, if you have a powermatic lathe, when you do bore work, a lot of it on a powermatic lathe, that quill, and I don't know about other lathes, but that quill is centered on a tapped screw. So that tapped screw is rubbing on your inside of your quill, and that downward force will put grooves in your quill slot, and you'll find that your quill starts to drag because you malformed that with that set screw. Why they use a screw that's threaded all the way to the end, I don't know, but they did. So once I learned a quill, I just bought another quill. I have a printing quill and a boring quill and a regular quill. You can clean them up with a file. It's not a big deal. But if you turn 25 or 30 of these, it's going to affect your quill. I use this monster for boring. You know, you can get those things at Home Depot that are about 1/4 of an inch thick that extend your stuff out. This thing is real beefy. And it came from Peachtree. And I think the whole system's like $50. And you get, I think, 3 pieces. It comes on a Morse paper. So you don't have to put it in a chuck or anything. You stab it into your roll stock and take off. Slowly. So I've got these pieces that I've cut in half, 6 inches long. And whether you want to bore them and then turn them around, or whether you want to turn them around and then bore them, it's up to you. You're gonna, it's just whatever you prefer. I can't even remember whether I turn them around first or bore them first. And once I bore them, I have these. This came from, it left me. It doesn't matter, they don't sell them anymore. But it was actually a Kaleidoscope. It's a Kaleidoscope manual. It's a really nice manual. Anyway, once I got them bored out, they were green wood, so I put them in the alcohol bath, and then I took them out and let them dry. Once they were dry, I would take 2 of the 6-inch pieces, set them off to the side, take one of the other 6-inch pieces and cut it in half. It takes about 9 inches to make a kaleidoscope. So that you have 2 6-inch pieces and 2 3-inch pieces, you make 2 kaleidoscopes out of. I do it this way because this is where you're going to part it to make your object chamber separate from your mirror chamber. And this gives you a permanent landmark. If you make a pencil mark, you turn it off. This way, you have that landmark all the way through turning your piece. This one's on a mandrel. What you have to be careful of, and you'll notice all of my kaleidoscopes have kind of a lump here. That's because that's where the bearing is. And I want that extra strength, that extra wood to give that extra strength. I have this little device here that tells me when I'm getting too thin. It's just a little gauge I made. I have turned them to the point where I had to put a collar on there because I didn't have enough wood to support that bearing. I want to go back to the objects in the object chamber, but I forgot to tell you. One of the neat things about kaleidoscopes is you can customize that object chamber to the person you're giving it to. My financial planner used to make money for me, but that's been a long time ago. So I decided he had tchotchkes all over his office. So I was going to make it a kaleidoscope, and you can buy shredded money at Amazon for party stuff. So I got some shredded money. I got some gold and silver um, leaves, gold and silver leaf, and I found house money, house money, little nickel, dime, and quarter that are little tiny things, but they look like the real thing. So I made his object chamber full of money. My dentist was retiring, and after 40 years of his hands in my mouth, I thought I ought to give him something. So I went online and Googled terms for dentist, and they have little bitty tiny extraction tools, and they had some little tiny teeth, and they had other little some dental floss and toothpaste and toothbrushes. So his is going to have all that stuff in it. My great grandson Joey, I just put block letters Joey in there, so his name floats around in his. So you can really make this a personal gift. Anyway, I forgot to tell you that, and I think that's important that you be able to do that. So we got these two pieces fused together. We got our landmark, and we're going to throw this thing on the manual. I want to turn it to final. This is what you want it to look like. Maybe not like this particular one. You can get as flowery as you want to. You can go just crazy with all sorts of stuff. I've done inlays. I've done stacks. It's a great scrapwood project if you got a bunch of wood laying around that you want to make a kaleidoscope out of. Once I get it turned, I go all the way to finish, complete. Sand and buffing, complete finish, this way. And then I part it. Once you part it there, this part is done. This part you have a little bit more work to do. And I'm going to step back here a minute. I'm going to tell you something. If you don't want to mess with the polycarbonate tube, you can just turn it like this. Put your bearing on here, just like that. You may want to go with a larger bearing to make sure you have enough stock here to support it. You can't turn it like this because you have to make that glue out. So you have to turn it that way. The new one I passed around the newest one I made, it's made like this. Can't tell the difference. I didn't know if you could do it this way or not, and I didn't want to come here and tell you you could unless I'd done one that way. So last week I did one that way, and it works okay. The problem is, and the advantage of the polycarbonate tube is you always have this constant. You know what this is going to be. When you turn this, you have to do caliper work. You have to keep checking, turning, checking, turning, checking, turning. That's why I use these. This polycarbonate tube comes in 8-foot sections. I think I have 60 feet of it in the shop. I've got enough for the rest of my life. One thing I failed to mention, and I noticed it here, the outside of the bearing, and I don't know if this does any good or not. I'll take this bearing over to my grinder and deface this outside part. Put some really nice scratches in it so that it gets a better tooth. Because I'm worried that that's a little bit slick. You can't do that on the inside, but I do it on the outside. Okay, so we turn to completion. We're separating the two. We pop it off the mandrel. Now things get a bit complicated here because you have to do some measurements once you get this set. You see if that's going to fit. It's not going to fit. You're going to make sure that you leave room for your lens at the bottom. Never forget your lens. You'll be upset if you forget your lens. Make sure that you've put your lens in the bottom. you're going to have to do your cutout for your bearing, and you're going to have to do your cutout for your object chamber. Once you get your cutout for your bearing made, and you want it to be snug, pretty tight, doesn't have to be real tight, but snug. Once you get your cutout for your bearing made, you need to determine where in here your object chamber is going to go. So when you use the carbonite tubing, you know that that's where your mirrors are going to stop. You want your object chamber to be a little bit offset from the mirrors. So you want it about a 1/16 of an inch there. You don't want your object chamber to rub. So you got some offset there. So you put this on here, you run a pencil mark in there, inside, against that polycarbonate tube. Or if you're using this method, you would rub it, you would mark it against this, so you know how deep to go. To do my lead outs for the bearings, I use a Forstner bit. If you've ever used a Forstner bit on anything, you know that if you don't have that center spike to hit, it goes all over the place. That doesn't happen on a lathe. I just figured this out. You put the Forstner bit in the tailstock, and as long as you go slow, that Forstner bit cuts really nice. It doesn't bind, it doesn't, and you can measure. You can get your object chamber and your bearing cut really nice. Get it in there flush. So now, yes.
How do you keep the lens in place? Is it just a round tube of glue they wrap it?
Now, let me see here. I've got my lens in. This is glued in place. The polycarbonate tube is glued in place. So it's holding the lens that way. And then I just put the end cap over that. And the end cap holds it in place. The reason I didn't want to glue the lens in place is so I could take it out if it ever got dropped and something broke. It hasn't happened yet, but you don't want it to. Now, 40 years from now, somebody drops it and you're dead and the lens breaks. They're not going to know what to do anyway, but how do you fix a kaleidoscope? I don't know. Mine's on my, you can buy a kaleidoscope for your iPhone. It just, kaleidoscope program. But what fun is that? Okay, so we turned it. We need to make the depth for our, object chamber so that it doesn't rub. Then you're ready to put your object chamber in. Have I gone over everything? Is everybody totally confused? Yeah, all of them are the mirrors, depending on which method you're using. You don't want it to rub. You want it to be close. You don't want a big gap there because it'll yeah, when you turn this down, it's going to make a little shelf. It's going to be very slight because there's not a lot of difference in the bore that you've made. And depending on which, if you're using this one, there's going to be a big difference. This one, not so much. One reason I wouldn't do it is because I usually do that down in my shop and I wouldn't want to have dirt on my lens. So what I've done for myself is I've stacked a number of these washers together to make a blank lens. So you stack these washers together so that they're even with this, and you can use that to put in the bottom. Or you can put blue tape over the lens and make sure that it didn't get dirty. Is this really, you don't want dirt on your lens.
So how do you cut the polycarbonate tubing so that it doesn't shatter?
That's a good question. I do it on the bandsaw, and you do it kind of like this. What I actually did, if you want to make you made a jig, because I'm doing so many of these, I got to make stuff. And I enjoy making stuff I made these mandrels and I don't even need them. This is a homemade mandrel. I made a hinged open thing that is exactly this big around. I put some beads of silicone in it so it holds tight. So, and I'll try to explain this to you. It kind of sticks out the hole. So you got almost a clamp, a hole shaped clamp around this. And then you can run it through your bandsaw and it doesn't break as bad. It is tough to cut. And that's another cautionary tale. If you turn these things around and then you decide to, this is another safety tip. You turn these things around when you're doing your 6-inch thing and you decide to cut them in half and they're already round, do not pull a chop saw down like that. I actually broke my chop saw. I had a catch so bad in one of these coming down like that, it caught through this into the back plane and broke the back plane on my Bosch saw. And scared me to death. You can cut it if you come in like this, if you're really careful. But cutting something round on a chop saw, you got to be really careful. And that chop saw, Bosch is renowned for not making parts. So that Bosch chop saw was ruined. Yeah, you could, but I don't think that far ahead. I thought, there's a saw. I'll cut it in half. Actually, to be truthful, that was a solid piece of hickory I was doing. It didn't even have a hole in the middle. So it was just something stupid I did. But it ruined the chop saw. I got to get a new one. Okay, I'm not wandering around long enough. Does anybody know how to make a kaleidoscope now? So basically, you got the lens, you got the mirrors, you got the either the polycarbonate tubing or this outcropping here that you turn with wood. That out for the bearing, that out for the object chamber. And it should all fit together nice and smooth. I didn't cover the end caps, and I will need to. When you got this thing up on the lathe and you're turning it, you want to make sure that your end cap's going to fit. So as you're turning, you're going to have to keep checking. Even with a caliper, I ruined one, so I made a keyhole out of it. And now I can check it without taking it off the lathe. But you want to make sure. The other thing is you want to pay attention to how much you're going to have to cut off up here. This particular blank is ruined because I went too deep here. I'm gonna have to cut most of that flare off, and that's gonna make this kaleidoscope look stupid. So that's the other part. When you go to make your object chamber, and I'll cover this. After you've done your lead out through the bearing, you're gonna reverse mount this, and that's when you do your finish work in here. You decide how deep you want to go for your object chamber. You kind of get an idea. And you turn it in this way, then you sand and finish this end. So those are the very last thing I do is finish this front part. Yes, sir.
I can keep the object in the tube.
For final?
Yeah.
A little bit of glue. Modest amount of glue. You know, you use as much as you want to. And it's hard to say how much to use because you don't know what it's going to take it apart. But I've never had to take one apart. But I figure you just take a wooden dowel and beat on it till this thing pops out. And that's more me being OCD, I guess, about wanting to take it apart sometime. Like I said, the grandkids have been unable to destroy them, and they're really good at tearing up stuff. They've torn up most of my stuff. I have one that's on the spectrum, and he's like a buzzsaw. A cute buzzsaw, but a buzzsaw. Any questions? I got off my notes, and I'm not sure I didn't ramble a little bit. So we'll go around here, and it's a very slight beat blue. It's probably you don't want any glue out. I think that's what happened on that one that doesn't turn well. Is the 89,000, 86,000 bleed out a little bit. So I put that tiny bead on there, and then on the inside here, I just more or less wet it with the 6,000. And so far, like I say, someday I'm going to pull out them and they're going to come apart. But I tried to take one apart because it was banging, and it was a chore. You're more likely to tear up the bearing than you are to get this apart. The E9000 is some pretty tough stuff. Just don't forget, this is a hotel key. It makes a pretty good shim. You want to make sure you put that shim in there with your glue. I spray this with silicone, so if there's some glue, you don't want your shims to be stuck in there permanently. So I spray with a little silicone. And E6000 will set up in an hour or so to where you can kind of tell whether it's going to work or not. So let me look at my notes and see what I forgot, because I abandoned my notes. It's not 10 o'clock yet, is it? I haven't seen it react with anything. The only thing that I did is I went down to Hobby Lobby and I bought some really pretty Swarovski crystals. Swarovski, those guys. Yeah, those crystals. Once you put them in the silicone, they don't glitter. That silicone will just take the glitter right out of it. You can see them, but they're just kind of floating around.
Would you suggest that they do the two sleeves that fit together? Seems to me that would be a lot easier than worrying about mic and cutting exact, cutting everything on holes and all that stuff.
You talking about the polycarbonate tube? This is the way I would go. I don't know if I have the source of this. It's USA Plastics. And like I say, you have to know the size of your mirrors before you can determine what polycarbonate tubing you're going to use. If your mirrors are wider, you're going to need bigger tubing. My calculations are made around this mirror and these tubes. And like everything else, since the pandemic, supply chains have changed and people are not doing what they did with mirrors before. I don't think these size mirrors are available anymore. I think the mirrors are a little shorter. I didn't measure, but I think these are about a quarter, an 18th of an inch, 20, I don't know, a little bit short. So you have to, it doesn't, as long as you adjust your kaleidoscope accordingly. You're going to have to shorten your kaleidoscope just a little bit. Well, I don't have these measured, but the new one I think is a little shorter. That's all. Okay. So we know about UV glue now.
Put the whole thing together, give it a piece of what we haven't seen.
Not that I know of. And I tell you what, if you want to know the construction technique, the best way for you to do that is to come up here and take this one apart completely and put it back together again. The one YouTube thing I saw, he does not approach it like this. he turns his with a flare at the end. So he turns his mirror chamber and just flares it. Then he makes his object chamber tube slide over that onto the flare. So it's like a flare fitting. Then he puts a collar, I believe he puts a collar behind that to hold it in place. But you're wood on wood at that point. That kaleidoscope is not going to last forever. And if you take it to Lubbock, Texas, it might not even last the year. I tried to make this as bulletproof as I possibly could, and it gets a little complicated. But there's the videos for putting kaleidoscopes together are pretty scarce. What you're going to wind up seeing is somebody making one out of a cardboard toilet paper thing. I don't know. Some of it's pretty awful. But things come up and take this apart and put it back together again. It's kind of iffy on how this is done. I can try to put together some instructions. This is a pretty complex operation. And it will challenge you with your proficiencies on accuracy. But the reward is pretty good. The mirror can actually be touching the lens. As a matter of fact, if you do it correctly, it should touch the lens. The lens of the mirror and the end cap should be all touching. I think the new one I made, it rattles a little bit, and that's because the lens is not exactly flush. Anything else? Sorry, I got kind of rambling here, but there's a lot to talk about here, and I have an old man brain, and it tends to wander.
One of us are looking to do the same.
Yes, well, a mouse trying to invade my wall in my house woke me up at 2:00 this morning, so I've been up since then. So not only am I sleeping old and I'm sleep deprived, and I wasn't very kind to my brain in the 60s. So
Question on the object, the
object chamber.
object chamber. You said only for about 80% of why?
Of the silicone or of the objects?
That 50% of the object,
Yes.
and then it's 80% fill in the certain. Well, why don't you fill it all the way?
You don't want to run out the hole, because then your glue is not going to work when you try to seal your hole.
Okay.
And the ones you buy, there's just a degree of waste of silicone. It really doesn't show when you tumble it. You're not going to be able to see it. But I just get as close as I can without it running out. Quarter of an inch. It's just really not critical. That silicone is so viscous that it's really gluey anyway.